You think you know the story of the Titanic. The iceberg, the string quartet, the star-crossed lovers. You've seen the movie. But the version of history you were sold is a gentle bedtime story compared to the grotesque reality. The truth is a nightmare of fire, ice, and human failure so profound it was deliberately scrubbed from the popular narrative. You're about to learn what really happened in those final, agonizing hours. From the raging inferno in the ship's belly that doomed it before it ever saw ice, to the ship that watched 1,500 people freeze to death and did nothing, to the ghoulish death ship, sent to collect the bodies that had to make horrifying choices based on social class. This isn't a tragedy. This was a cascade of horrors that will change everything you thought you knew about that night. The ship was already on fire. The Titanic wasn't the victim of a random act of nature. It was an accident waiting to happen. You don't learn this in history class out there, but for days before the collision, a massive coal fire was raging uncontrollably deep inside the ship, in a storage bunker right up against the hull. We're not talking about a small flame. We're talking about an inferno reaching temperatures over 1,000 degrees Celsius, so hot that it warped the steel hull and made it dangerously brittle. The ship's officers knew. They tried to fight it, but it was too intense. They made the fateful decision to conceal the fire from the passengers and press on, even turning the ship so the long, dark burn mark on the hull wouldn't be visible from the docks. Modern engineers believe this fire critically weakened the exact section of the ship that the iceberg struck. The unsinkable ship didn't get a 300-foot gash. No, the steel, already cooked to the point of collapse, simply shattered on impact. The Titanic's fate wasn't sealed by an iceberg. It was sealed by a secret fire its owners chose to ignore. The sound of hell. Forget the cinematic image of people quietly slipping beneath the waves. The 1,500 souls thrown into the 28-degree North Atlantic water experienced a death so agonizing it defies imagination. It wasn't drowning that killed them. It was a slow, torturous freeze. But here's the truly horrifying part: the sound. Survivors in the lifeboats, floating just a few hundred yards away, were haunted for the rest of their lives by the noise. They described it not as individual screams, but as a single, continuous, inhuman roar. The collective sound of hundreds of people groaning, shrieking, and wailing as the ice-cold water paralyzed their muscles and crushed the air from their lungs. One officer described it as the sound of a crowd at a baseball game. Another called it a long, continuous wail that eventually faded to silence after 20 minutes. But wait, it gets even more bizarre. The ship's chief baker, Charles Juffin, decided that if he was going to die, he was going to die comfortable. He ran back to his cabin and drank 2 entire bottles of whiskey. When the ship went down, he was so thoroughly drunk that the alcohol prevented his veins from constricting. He calmly paddled and tread water for over 2 hours in the freezing ocean, reportedly feeling no cold, until he was pulled onto an overturned lifeboat. While the world's richest men froze solid in minutes, the drunk baker survived because he was too intoxicated for hypothermia to work properly. The ship that watched them die. This is the part of the story that turns tragedy into a crime. The Titanic was not alone in the dark. Just over the horizon, so close that its lights were clearly visible, sat another steamship, the SS Californian. They saw the Titanic stop. They saw it firing its white distress rockets, 8 of them over the course of an hour. The crew woke their captain, Stanley Lord, to report the signals. He was told a large passenger ship was firing rockets, a universal sign of extreme distress. And he did nothing. He dismissed them as company signals and went back to sleep. 4 hours, the crew of the Californian watched the massive liner slowly disappear from the horizon. They watched it create 1,500 frozen corpses. You don't learn this in the movies, but a formal inquiry later concluded that the Californian was close enough to have pushed its way through the ice to the rescue, and could have saved many, if not all, of the lives that were lost. They were close enough to hear the screams, but their radio operator had already signed off for the night. The ghoulish class system of the dead. The horror didn't end when the screaming stopped. A ship called the Mackay Bennett was sent out from Halifax to perform the grimmest job imaginable, recovering the bodies. They arrived to a scene from a nightmare. A vast field of hundreds of floating bodies, all bobbing upright in their cork life jackets, their limbs frozen solid in grotesque positions. But here's where it gets truly disgusting. The Mackay Bennett was too small to carry all the bodies back. So they had to choose. The crew was given a sickening order: only recover the bodies of the first-class passengers. They identified them by their expensive clothes and jewelry. These bodies were embalmed and placed in coffins. The bodies of second- and third-class passengers, and the crew, were deemed unworthy. They were sewn into canvas sacks, weighed down with iron, and dumped back into the sea. Imagine the horror. Even in death, your social class determined whether your body was worthy of a proper burial. Over 100 victims, found and identified, were thrown back into the ocean like garbage simply because they weren't rich enough. So there you have it. The real Titanic. A story not of romance, but of a burning ship, a negligent crew, agonizing deaths, and a classist system so cruel it extended even to the corpses. The most famous maritime disaster in history wasn't just an accident. It was a perfect storm of human arrogance, greed, and indifference. The truth isn't just sad. It's monstrous. If these horrifying truths made you question the history you've been taught, hit that subscribe button. Because the past is filled with buried nightmares that are far more shocking than any fiction. And trust me, you haven't heard anything yet.